Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. This video is titled 2017, the fakest year on record at NOAA and NASA. The press today is full of stories that 2017 was one of the 3 hottest years on record, and it's full of bright red maps which make it look like the Earth is burning up. This is based on new reports out of NOAA and NASA. Let's look at these claims and see if they're true. First of all, 2017 wasn't a hot year at all. The United States has by far the best long-term temperature record in the world, and the frequency of hot days has been plummeting over the last century. This graph shows the percentage of days over 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees centigrade versus year. As you can see, there's been a very strong decline over the past century, and that hot days in the United States peaked in 1936 when tens of thousands of people died in the heat. In 1936, 1 day out of 10 throughout the entire year was over 95 degrees. This is incomprehensible by modern standards. There were many years that were very hot back in the 1930s. The 1950s also had some very hot years, and 1980 was the last really hot year in the United States. In 2017, over here on the right side, was actually one of the least hot years on record in the United States. It wasn't record hot. It was record cool. We've gotten very spoiled in the United States having a number of very cool years recently, and people have forgotten how hot the United States past used to be. In the 1930s, we had the Dust Bowl, and it was so hot that millions of people had to flee the Great Plains to escape the heat and drought. John Steinbeck wrote about this poignantly in his book, The Grapes of Wrath. Now let's look at what's actually going on in the world. Siberia is reported to be having the coldest temperatures ever recorded on Earth outside of Antarctica. Temperatures there are below minus 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And the first week of January was the coldest on record here in the United States. I was in Washington, D.C., and there were people ice skating on the reflecting pool. During this week last year, Alaska was experiencing record cold, temperatures below minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And this week they're having a repeat of last year's extreme cold. So what's going on with these claims of record warmth? Well, we're getting big dips in the jet stream, which bring very cold air south and mild air from the mid-latitudes up north. When warm, moist air moves north into the Arctic, the moisture freezes, and the latent heat of freezing releases heat into the atmosphere. This warms the atmosphere up in the Arctic. So what happens is we get Arctic temperatures of minus 25 degrees centigrade instead of the usual minus 30 degrees centigrade. This is what NOAA and NASA are calling hot. Now let's look at the next big problem with NOAA's temperature data. It's fake. This is the bright red map which NOAA releases to the public. It makes it look like the Earth is burning up. Note the areas in the circles which are shown by NOAA to be very hot or warm. In fact, this area of New Guinea is shown to be record hot. Now let's look at the actual thermometer data. NOAA didn't actually have any temperature readings in New Guinea, which they showed as record hot. There was no data in Africa, which they showed as being very warm. And this warm region up in Siberia was actually very cold. The data from NOAA is fake. Cold is shown as warm. Record heat was actually no data. No data was shown as warm. The bright red hot map which NASA is showing here, over land was actually 50% of the pixels were missing data. About 1/3 of the pixels were above normal temperatures, and the rest were below normal temperatures. This isn't science, it's fraud. Furthermore, ClimateGate emails show that not only is the land data fake, but much of the ocean data is fake too. This is a letter from Phil Jones. For much of the southern hemisphere between 40 and 60 degrees south, the normals are mostly made up as there's very little ship data there. Another way to evaluate the temperature data in 2017 is to look at proxy data like ice. According to the Danish Meteorological Institute, Greenland had the 5th largest ice gain on record last year. That doesn't sound like record hot. And in 2015, NASA reported that Antarctica has been steadily gaining ice, not losing it, the exact opposite of what we hear from climate scientists and the press. And according to the Danish Meteorological Institute, Arctic sea ice has also shown a large gain in thickness and volume over the last 10 years. This is the current Arctic sea ice thickness map from the Danish Meteorological Institute. All of these areas shown in green, yellow, and red are more than 10 feet thick. You can see that most of the Arctic is covered with very thick ice. Now let's compare this to 10 years ago. There was much less thick ice 10 years ago than there is now. The ice is getting thicker in the Arctic and the volume is increasing. Once again, the exact opposite of what we hear from climate scientists and the press. NASA and NOAA create the appearance of warming by altering the data. They've been steadily cooling the past and steadily warming the present. The black line is NASA's 1981 graph. The red line is their 2001 graph, and the blue line is their current graph. They've been cooling the 1940s and warming years after 1980. Global warming isn't caused by carbon dioxide, it's caused by data tampering at government agencies. If you feel cold, it's because you're cold, not because it's record hot as NASA and NOAA claim. This is the biggest scam in science history. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.